It is a very striking fact that God has often used young men in awakenings in Scotland, John Livingston, people like William Chalmers Burns, Robert Murray McShane. From one point of view, we have no idea why he does that. He does what he does sovereignly. What we do know is that in that he illustrates basic principles of how he works, which is he delights to use the weak. He delights to use those who are conscious of their frailty. He delights to use instruments that have no sense of their own station in society or even station in the church. I think it's also true that thereby he humbles those who are older. Calvin has a very interesting statement in the Institutes when he says, you know, you sit there listening to the preacher and you think, I could do as good as this. And essentially, if I can paraphrase him, he says, that's why he is the preacher and you aren't. That God means to get all the glory to himself.
Think of somebody like Martin Lloyd-Jones. When he was in Aberavon in the 1920s, 1930s, I think there was revival there. He wasn't altogether sure about that, because I think he was thinking, especially in terms of great numbers. Well, there weren't great numbers being converted, but something happened during his ministry, and there were scores of people converted. You wouldn't say that he had backslidden then during his time in London. You wouldn't say that his convictions were not as clear. If anything, they were much clearer by then. But God granted revival in Aberavon, but didn't grant revival on the same scale through his ministry in London and worldwide. And I think you can say the same thing with, say, Spurgeon's ministry. There was a special season around the 1859 period when there was a spiritual harvest through Spurgeon's ministry. And you couldn't say that Spurgeon's preaching wasn't so good after that, that it had declined in some way, or that Spurgeon wasn't as spiritual before 1859 or after 1859. No, he was the same man in every way. But God granted the increase in a specific period. And I think this is repeated over and over again.
Why does God do things when there are such risks attached to it? Because it's pretty clear, isn't it, that a young man caught up in extraordinary fruitfulness that older men may not be experiencing. It may easily go to his head. You know, why does God take that risk? It's not a risk to him, but it can be a risk to us if we take our eyes off him. And I think while it's true that you read of some of these younger men who have remained faithful to the end, it's also true that there have been young men who have lost the place, in a sense, turned in upon themselves, had something of the Nebuchadnezzar spirit. And I think, without exception, the evident result has always been their spiritual disaster and the spiritual disaster of their work. But it's a constant reminder to us, not only that God uses the simple to confound those who think they are wise and the weak to confound those who are strong, but that he actually employs earthen vessels so that the light of the glory of God may shine and the glory may be seen to be his and not to be ours.